All right. There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Effluvium. And I have a returning guest, Gabe Oppenheim. And his live stream for the second season for the first season, actually, not second, for the first season, was a fan favorite back in, I think it was April of 2023. So he is back. He is returning. He's going to share with us some juicy stuff. You know he's good for that. And he also has a book. Many of you know him from the Ghost Perfumer, but he has a new one. He's going to be sharing the details on that, and I think that many of you will be much interested in this one, in spite of it not being necessarily perfume related, unless he may say otherwise. There may be a little bits and pieces of perfume in it. I only started reading it, and I'm already riveted by it. So we're going to be talking about that. He's going to also be talking about a program that is being broadcast in Japan that he and some other creatives were behind. So he's going to be talking about that as well. And we'll get some questions from you. And we'll just have a good session, chewing the fat, shooting the shit. Hey, that's why I named it Effluvium after all. So we're going to bring him in just a couple of moments. We have 14 people who are currently tuned in. And I have myself a very sensible Pinot Noir here. Lovely. Hits the spot. Let's take a look at the chat here. We have Ricardo Neves. Good to see you again. Welcome back. I'm glad that you could catch a live stream. And welcome, as always, to Pat Lester. Hello to you. You do not own any Greed perfume. I've owned them in the past. I have one. I actually have Royal Mayfair. But I was tuned into them sort of at the tail end of when they had the gray caps. So I had a few of those at one time, and I had this lovely one that was called Green Valley. And I was quite a fan and loved wearing Bois de Portugal, Tabarome, the original vetiver, which is the unvetiver, one of the last things I would think of when wearing that is vetiver. It's very deep into the mix. Justin C., hello. Supply and demand, happy new year to you as well. Lovely to have you here. And Oris Eris, it is always a pleasure to see you in the chat during our live streams. Hey, Will Mullen, hey to you, currently drenched in Paco Rabanne Tenere. My sample spilled on me. Well, that's a glorious spill. Splinter 47 Aberdeen Lavender from Creed is the only one I own, and I really enjoy it. So I'm wondering if we're going to talk a little bit more about Creed. I think we will. We have 16 people tuned in. Without further ado, let's bring on our guest, Gabe.
Hello.
Wonderful to have you back.
Thanks so much for having me, JJ. I appreciate it very much.
And you're back for the third season, which is all one-on-one. I don't know if you caught on to that. No panel, just a one-on-one discussion. Gives me more opportunities to ask you questions and have more of a flow in the conversation. So that should be great as well.
I appreciate that. It's very sweet of you to have me back. I actually caught your incense video, and it had a uniquely soothing vibe. I'm not being sarcastic. It just sounds like that because that's my voice. So that was really cool. Just hearing about various resinoids and vibing with that.
Yes, that was the last of my Notes and Accords series that I did last week. It was a week ago this evening, the incenses episode. So I'm glad you enjoyed that. I did several of them. You should tune in. I should actually do a playlist of them, the Notes and Accords series, but they all pretty much have that vibe. Great
I heard
stuff.
some people they were like, what's this weird background spa music? And I was like, no, give me that spa music. I'll take off my clothes. Someone will rub me in the back, or I'll just, pretend someone's giving me a massage. The spa vibes were real. Also, when you're sniffing various raw materials, there's this like amazing effect where I don't physically have the same raw material in my hands, but I'm sort of in my brain imagining what it smells like to you because of various connections I may have with other raw materials. So it's pretty cool.
The whole purpose of that series was to encourage fragrance enthusiasts to seek out the raw materials and to have fun with them, to experiment with them, or to just have them for reference. I think that it is a really good idea for people who are deep into the hobby. And it gives them a better idea of what they're smelling, what they're trying to parse out of a particular perfume. Because I notice a lot of content creators and enthusiasts, they've convinced themselves that they're smelling the things that they're supposed to smell, and sometimes I'll catch them sort of misinterpreting one thing for another, or just giving an educated guess as to whether or not they're smelling happens to be something in a notes pyramid. And I think it also helps people to kind of not be so reliant on the notes pyramid as well, because as we know, those often aren't nearly as accurate or as proper representation for a particular fragrance. So
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I couldn't agree more with all of that. There's one particular fragrance person on the YouTube. I actually don't watch this person very much anymore, but I used to, and I found the person to be not like an influencer or a peddler or like a propagandist, but just someone with really honest intentions, but always getting things wrong. Like, I think I smell X, but like I know for sure, having like looked at, a GCMS and other things, that's just not in this mix like at all. And it like kept happening. So eventually I just was like, I'm going to have to turn this person off because it's very distracting. They're like, and I'm getting this and that. And I'm thinking, you're not. I know you're not. It's okay though. I mean,
No, it's okay.
and
I
that's
have
okay.
a, I have a,
So
I think I could take a wild guess as to who it is, but I'm not going to mention.
you'd be
But there's
surprised.
there's multiple people who.
No, yeah, this wasn't. This is like someone who's actually not even that famous. It's just someone I just really liked everything except for that one point where they were like, and then I'm getting X, Y, and Z, and I'm just like, I spoke to that perfumer the other day. Yeah, I can't explain why you're getting X, Y, and Z. So anyway, but it's great to be back. I'm
Yeah, it
open to
is.
all questions from all people about almost all things. Although I do have a book to promote, but we can get there. And I'm here at your disposal and at the disposal of the Effluvium fan base, which I don't have a word for. Like I was thinking of like Taylor Swift has Swifties. I couldn't come up with something for Effluvium people. So
My sniffies. That sounds so wrong.
yeah.
My friend Donna Sandhu, she would call her, well, she never really referred to them as her fans, but her people, she'd call them my nosies, and I always thought that was sort of cute. But I don't have an equivalent moniker for people who tune in. Maybe that could be sort of a contest that I can throw for, like, name a good sort of nickname for my fan base.
Yeah.
It just seems dorky to even consider myself having a fan base, but the people who tune into what I do. Scott Bear says hello all and happy new year to you. Great to have you here, and happy new year to you too. So we'll ease into the discussion on your book because I actually am excited to continue reading it. But we'll get started by, how it is about audience retention. Let's get a captive audience, and let's sort of ease into the discussion by talking about some perfume stuff. If you have anything new to share from the last time that you've joined us back in 2023 that you think some of our viewers would be interested in hearing about.
Okay, yeah. So let's see. The last time I joined you, it's funny because it feels like that was recent and also not recent, and I guess it's 2025, so it is both. Year changes are strange. Nothing actually changes, but psychologically, it really does leave you in a strange kind of gap. It doesn't feel like 2025, and yet it is. And so, where does that leave me? Blue pill or red pill? Okay, so by 2023, the book had been out, I suppose, for a little bit. but I don't think Creed had been bought by Kering, the parent company of Gucci, for $3.8 billion. So that's a pretty big, significant advancement in the story that I was telling, because when I was writing the book about Pierre Bourdin being this perfumer for Creed secretly, the company was sold for $1 billion to BlackRock while I was writing it. And so then the resale of the company for $3.8 billion from BlackRock to essentially what is Gucci, or the parent of Gucci, that I think has happened since, because that happened in the summer of 2023. And that's really interesting because it's like a really, I never went to business school. My brother did. He's the one with numbers. I'm the words person, although he's smarter than I am and could be a words person. Regardless, it's like a really good case study in like how to flip a company. You buy it off a family guy who sort of just wants to cash out, but has never really done business in a traditional sense. You put in like a technocratic administration. In this case, they did it in London. They brought in the chairman of Diageo Spirits, and the CEO they brought in from the perfume company Miller Harris. And you start marketing things a little differently, and you open up boutiques, and you just get things organized a little bit more. You raise prices by several $100s without changing anything about what's in the bottle. So your margins just go way up. And within literally 3 years, you can sell it for more than triple, almost quadruple what you bought it for, on the basic promise that this is a really financially successful thing because the margins are so gigantic, which they are. It's now organized, and we haven't yet moved into China or sold women's fragrances. So you have a huge opportunity to even enlarge in this further. And they pulled that off. In fact, they pulled it off to such a degree that, as I've mentioned once before, even Pierre Bourdin, who's generally not one to hold grudges, was sort of like, are you effing kidding me? You just took these same fragrances and resold them for almost $4 billion. He, I think, was salty for about a day about that. Then the saltiness went away because he's not that sort of person. So that's in the real world something that's happened. I personally, also in the real world, but separate from Creed, have been approached by some interesting humans who want to do things in the perfume world and think, Gabe wrote a book, maybe he could help me. One of them was a woman who, she calls herself an artist. She's allowed to do this for two reasons. One, because she makes things that she calls art, and two, because she comes from a family that supports such endeavors with tremendous cash. And I got sent a screenplay. I don't really want to make fun of people, but this person rose to fame in the art world. I found this out later, like 10 years ago, by launching a blockchain token. I don't want to curse, but I think it was called like Bitcoin, and that was supposed to be like an artistic project. Anyway, again, I'm really not trying to make fun of anyone. I found this out later. I didn't really know. One day in my inbox, I think I got this really sweet invite, or maybe I got a text saying, do you want to like come down to like a hotel for lunch? We want to write this perfume movie and we need like someone to consult on it. So I went down to this very fancy hotel in Lower Manhattan, and I had lunch with these two women, and they had sent me a script for a short film. So I think I had read the script before we sat down, and they said they wanted to expand it into a larger film. And the short film was like any perfume commercial you've ever seen, like ever since the death of Gaspard Ulliel. So now we have the new Bleu de Chanel fragrance guy is Timothée Chalamet. Took a while, but they chose him eventually. You can just choose any of the Gaspard Ulliel ads, or I don't know, a Timothée Chalamet ad, or Channing Tatum does Versace Eros energy ads. And it was kind of like that, except that it had a sort of mythological premise, which made it more artsy, about jellyfish stinging people, and that having something to do with the Medusa head in mythology, and that having something to do with an older man in an open-top convertible in the south of France, making kind of like a passionate kind of necking session with a woman who had been bitten by a jellyfish, and it was called Medusa. I'm going to get in trouble for this because it's pretty easy to figure out if you Google this, what this is. Anyway, long story short, I read the short screenplay and I thought, good for these people. They want to shoot a movie. I forgot the connection to perfume. I just remember the jellyfish and the makeout session. It had something to do with scent. I think it's a French man and he sniffs a perfume on the woman's neck maybe when he goes in for the kiss, but then she like slaps him and drives away. I don't know. It was like a fancy perfume commercial, and I met with these people, and they wanted to know like stuff about the industry to make the script more authentic. And I don't really think there was anything I could offer them from any of my experiences like deep within this industry that would make that script authentic. But I really actually was flattered that they thought I could help them. But I was insulted because there was two of them. One was a woman who was the actual writer of the script, and she had all of the sort of drive you'd want from a fellow writer and a genuine kind of passion for words. And I'm always going to salute that. But the other one was the token Bitcoin artist. And she got up in the middle of this like 2 to 3 hour lunch, and she would take a phone call about some art project she was working on, some installation in a different country, literally. And she'd take like a phone call and just like walk away, come back like 30 minutes later. It was honestly one of the most rude things I think I've ever had done to me. She did it like thrice during this lunch, maybe 4 times. And but the other woman who's the writer of the script was just like, but you have to understand she's an artist. This is just the way that she operates. And to Scott, so Scott, here's the deal. I knew I was coming on this JJ show, and I hadn't thought about this in a long time, this script I consulted on very briefly. So I went online to see, did they actually shoot the thing? And as it turns out, I actually think they shot the short film, not the long film. So it's possible that you can find the short film of this short film. Oh God, I'm going to say some things that are dirty. I think there's.
You can say dirty things as long as it's.
I think the script, besides involving necking, now that I'm recalling it, involved other sexual acts, and again, somehow
reach
all
for
tied.
Those euphemisms.
I don't remember which exact sexual acts. I just remember it was extreme. I'm remembering now. I sat down with these two women, and this is like very recent. It was after I talked with you, but before now. And they said, "Well, what did you think of what we sent you?" And now that I'm recalling it, it was really graphic. And I remember thinking as I sat down, this is a very post Me Too world. There's literally nothing you can say about this script. I don't really know so I just said erotic. I was like, I thought the script was erotic because I didn't really know what, but so that was the most ridiculous. Yeah, it was like a dream because I had forgotten that this thing happened. And then I went on the internet and saw photos from the south of France of them filming the short film. So somewhere there must exist like a 5 to 15 minute film or something, probably closer to like 8 minutes. It might be really good. It was just like if you took like, again, like, I don't know, any fragrance commercial and crossed it with like an NYU film student's like best efforts. And I don't really mean that to insult anyone. It's just what it was. But that was the weirdest offer. No, that was the second weirdest offer I took up since we've spoken. The weirdest one was a dude, I'll keep this anonymous, but he said, "Would you come on my podcast?" And I sort of said, "Sure." What I didn't check before I really said yes, maybe I checked and didn't care, was like who the other guests had been. And they had been exclusively like in the adult film world, like sex workers, basically. And there's no disrespect there. Maybe just exotic dancers, but I actually think there have been a couple sex workers. And the podcast was basically about asking them their opinions on scents, which is totally okay. I actually think it's kind of a fun concept. But I was the first non-sex related or dance related person to do the show, and we taped for like 3 hours. And I actually thought it had gone really well. And then, and this is like maybe the December of like the end of 23 going into 24. And it was like a driving snowstorm the day that we taped. We didn't tape anywhere near where I live in Manhattan. We taped in a beautiful studio. And getting there in the snow was kind of a nightmare. But I did it. We taped for 3 effing hours. And then the dude had a change of heart, like ex post facto. And I think he realized that like I didn't, and he's right, by the way. I didn't fit the vibe of his pod at all. Like it was just all of these, it was all women, and it was all people involved in like grinding for the film or grinding on other humans and contact with scents. And I was talking about like the industry and like how much people got paid for, I don't know, doing kuros. And so we taped for 3 hours. Afterwards, I remember like waiting for an Uber inside like a Chinatown dumpling shop, just really cold. And nothing ever happened with it. And it was just like 3 hours of talking to a dude being like his first non-stripper guest. So that was a waste of time. Things that weren't a waste of time, but I signed NDAs about, but I can talk about them a little maybe, is I did take up 2 consulting positions, one in 2022, which feels like it preceded when we were working on our last Effluvium, but maybe it overlapped. And then a subsequent one. And these were consultant jobs where I really got to use my knowledge of the industry to forge paths forward for potential real players in the industry. And that was really interesting and fun, and also extremely frustrating. Signing a non-disclosure agreement when you're a talker and a writer is the worst.
NDAs are a drag.
But also, I am very single-minded and stubborn, and I was being brought on as a consultant, which meant my opinion counted, but only as like the opinion that they take into consideration before they make their own decisions. And I would find myself thinking, you're making a bad decision, but no matter how much as a consultant you say that, it's still up to them to make the decision. So when that happened, that happened once, where I was sitting on an airplane, texting my now wife, who is at the time not my wife, just furious that I was on this airplane and things weren't, and I was flying away from what had been a really important sort of session, and things weren't going the way I wanted them to. I guess the final part about being the consultant that I was, that I didn't like but also knew about, is I recognized that I was going to have to give up some sort of journalistic objectivity with regard to the things I was consulting on. Like I couldn't just be a writer with no agenda if you're making money with an agenda. So I didn't really love that either, but that was part of the deal. So that's fine. But yeah, I'm open to questions. There are probably some things I can't answer about that. Yeah. How you doing, JJ?
I'm good. I wanted to just wish you congratulations, because since the last time you were with us, you did get married.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's true. Thank you very much.
Yeah. We currently have 26 people who are tuned in here. That
Would you
charming
believe
man,
I married someone who cannot, and it's not her fault. She's got a very good nose, like a better nose than I do, but she's so sensitive. She like to the smells. She is better at reading them than I am. And also she hates them, like cannot tolerate the smell of perfume. So
I
yeah,
happen to be familiar with that. I think some folks know my backstory with my partner. Yeah, yeah, he can detect things on clothing that has been washed a few times, and he will be able to smell something that I wore and then took a very long shower, did some pretty rigorous scrubbing with the soap, and I think I'm clean as a whistle, and he'll be able to detect it. he's he's got the nose of a bloodhound. That charming man in the chat had been making some suggestions while we were chatting here. Centaurians.
nice. And I noticed the Fred Heyman bottle from the Rodeo Drive from the '80s.
the Giorgio for men.
Yeah,
Coal buddies, coal bots, effluvians. Very nice.
he's got a lot.
He's got some good ones. What's going on with everybody else? Do you have any other suggestions for my minions?
So what's
I
the
don't want to
deal,
call them
JJ? You're
minions.
pulling. We're coming up with nicknames for your fans, but you're pulling back and trying
Well, I don't want to
to.
call them fans because that makes me seem like a douchebag. There's already people on YouTube who say like, "I love my fans." Like I don't want to be that person. Like, people who just tune in.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I don't want to consider myself
yeah, yeah.
as
Viewers,
someone who has
yeah,
fans. Um,
fellow travelers in this strange journey we all
Fellow
seem to be
travelers,
on.
I like it to be a level playing field. Like I'm not here as some sort of like way up here, like I'm the authority and you're my followers. Like no. Merry New Year's, everyone, from Antonio Hobson. I extend the same wishes to you as well, my dear Antonio. Thank you. Catherine is here. People who are overly sensitive to fragrance often have broad-ranging autoimmune issues. Yeah, that I've researched that. You're onto something with that. Well, you it's a fact, absolutely. Schmello Travis
But
and that
the interesting thing is, wait, can we go back to how do we go
Catherine's
back to
comment.
comments? Is there a way we can go back? There we go. The interesting thing about what Catherine says, hold on, I need water, is that while what she's saying has, I think she's referring in part to multiple chemical sensitivity, MCS, but there's also weirdly this Janus thing, right? Which is the opposite is also true, right? So if you think about when COVID-19 made people not be able to smell, it's because of inflammation in the olfactory bulb. And that inflammation in this part of the brain that is like accessible basically through the nose
Yeah,
made people lose their sense of smell and taste, which is the same thing. And so inflammation can do both things. That's the unfortunate thing about inflammation, why autoimmune things are so difficult. Right? It can go either way. It could make you way less sensitive to scent, also, which is problematic in its own way. I mean, perfumers during COVID were so afraid for obvious reasons. My brother lost his sense of smell and taste, and we like all kind of as a family moved back in together for a while during the pandemic, and he was pretty cool about it, but like I would have been freaked out because he didn't get it back fully for quite a long time.
God.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that, Catherine. Inflammation's actually also my own middle name, so we can talk about that. Yeah, it sucks. Smell of travelers. Smell of
Fellow
travelers.
travelers,
Smell of travelers.
Centralists. Pat
Yeah.
Lester says, sometimes I question whether our relatives are bloodhound or we are becoming a nosmic. There was actually a blog that I read. I actually really recommend it, and I happened upon it because I was doing a little bit of research, and I would recommend it to everyone here. Let me see here. It is from Pyrgos, Pyrgos. And he was mentioning this phenomenon where he noticed sort of this uptick in reviews where people say, like, well, I can't smell this after like 20 minutes, or it has really poor performance. But it's so inconsistent because then other people will say, like, I don't know what you're talking about this last 7 hours, and how there could be a correlation to many of those who have had COVID once or twice And even if they don't necessarily have complete anosmia long term, they could have something called parosmia, where it's like a reduced sense of smell, where something that would ordinarily be more perceived more so and for a longer period of time is just, they're just not picking up on it. And how there seems to be this influx of it in reviews, like he'll read reviews and people are talking about like these fragrances that, you know, the consensus usually would be that they are quite powerful. And you'll have a few people who say, well, you know, I don't smell this after a few minutes on my skin. Like I don't detect it at all. So it'd be interesting to consider how much our sense of smell has changed since so many of us have contracted this virus, and how that could have also have changed the perfume industry in the past 5 or so years, right?
Yeah, that's probably something no one's considered. At least there hasn't been a real study about it for sure. There is a place in Philadelphia called the Monell Center. It has a longer name, the Monell Chemical Sciences Center, and it is the premier research center in the world for smell, and has been for the sense of smell, and has been for a very, very long time. And if anyone would do that sort of study, it would be they.
Mm.
One of the things that's interesting is right before COVID hit, I started thinking about and researching a book on perfumers. That my book wasn't going to be about Creed or Pierre. It was just going to be about the sort of secret lives of perfumers, like what are they actually like. And I stumbled upon the fact that Pierre Bourdon was this major figure who was even more major of a figure than anyone knew. But before that, I was just interviewing perfumers generally. And before COVID hit, I could go to their offices. And I went to the office at Givaudan of Olivier. I don't speak French. I'm going to butcher his last name, Giotin. I'm so bad at this. He runs an alpaca farm in upstate New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting dude. And again, I didn't know there was a pandemic coming, but I asked him at the time, just out of, I guess, you know, this is one of these fortuitous sort of questions. When you have a cold, what happens to your sense of smell? And he said it actually goes both ways, if my recollection is right. He said that sometimes with colds, you smell not as keenly, but sometimes he smells more ingredients keenly. That actually things, I don't know if it's because other things are blocked out, but sometimes he felt that his sense of smell was concentrated by the cold. And you got to remember that colds are just rhinoviruses and coronaviruses. So that was interesting at the time. I had no idea what we were all about to embark upon. This was probably like January 2020. So, you know, there's a huge wave coming, and we didn't see it.
A really interesting subject to explore and to consider. You know, the chemical makeup of certain scent constituents, whether or not it's their molecular weight that determines whether or not they're actually more perceptible when you have a cold. Like if it is the lower molecular weight ones or the higher molecular weight ones, or if there's certain, you know, components that sort of they sort of plug into the olfactory receptors more easily when somebody has a cold, whereas others just don't really, you know, plug in. That is very interesting. It's a very interesting thing to consider. And also any other kind of health conditions, you know, not just having a virus, but, you know, other types of health conditions, or, you know, what are particular the state of our bodies, you know, what they call like the homeostasis, how that can change the way that we perceive smells depending upon where that falls. You know what I mean? It's a very cool thing to consider. I mean, that's some heady stuff for most perfume enthusiasts, but I'm sure there are some who would love to dive into something like that. Splinter 47 actually asked you, what perfume have you been wearing recently? And he wants to let you know that he's been wearing body kuros.
Body kuros. What did Anik Minardo do that? I think that's Anik Minardo, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Interesting silver bottle. What have I been wearing? I don't wear the same thing every day, which is weird in that it makes it really hard for me to remember. Today, I can tell you that I found I had a decent quantity, or at least enough for a day's worth of spray, to wear Safari Extreme by Abdul Samad Al Qureshi, which is very strong. But what did I wear like the day before that? I've been trying out new stuff. Like I tried out when Cecile Zarokian's Outlands came out from Amouage. I tried that. I really like also her Royal Tobacco. So that's been one of my big winter things. My wife particularly hates that one, which makes sense. It's strong and sort of uncompromising. What the hell else have I been wearing? Oh, this is interesting. So this is strange. I very much believe in giving people credit for what they do in the perfume world and not hiding behind things like Olivier Creed calling himself a perfumer. Obviously, I wrote a whole book sort of just destroying that. But I also find it interesting when companies try to find their way into an industry that's already sort of crowded and how they do it. And one of the stories that I find most interesting recently is the way that Latafa, which is not even, at least until recently, maybe it moved, but as far as I knew, they weren't even based in Dubai. They were based in the Emirate of Sharjah, how they brought on Givaudan to help give them this huge boost in terms of the quality of some of their scents, not all of them. And so they have a Parfums de Marly Altair dupe called Art of Arabia 2 or Art of Nature 2. What?
Yeah, I just love the names that they give.
Yeah, the names are wild. And it's the same vanilla that you would get in Altair, but I've been messing around with that because I've been curious as to how much they've brought on Givaudan, like how much do they really want to do this thing? And the answer is at a certain price point, quite heavily. I don't know if anyone can see this. I have this photo here. It's a woman bending over and signing something. I don't if this is visible. Is that visible, JJ?
Yeah, I zoomed you in so that you have the center stage here.
All right, so everyone can sort of see this?
Yes.
All right, cool. I'll pull it back. So that woman, she works for Givaudan, and what she's signing literally bending over on her knees, what she's signing is the Latafa logo, but like in 3D form. And it's at the Palazzo Versace in Dubai, where Givaudan and Latafa about 4 weeks ago had this party to celebrate their business entanglement. And there are all these inscriptions, basically all of the bigwigs of Givaudan from both the Middle East region, but also even a little bit higher, because oil sales are oil sales. So if the money talks, people will go. All these bigwigs from Givaudan signed this Latafa logo. One of the inscriptions on this, and they're all signing with this like big magic marker. One of the inscriptions is Givaudan Latafa hub. Then there's a heart. And then there's a hashtag IYKYK. If you know, you know. So one of the things I've been trying on lately is a bunch of these Latafas that I know are Givaudan. In fact, I don't even have to tell you, like, if you go on Fragrantica, I think the number one most popular fragrance is Latafa Camra. And if you just look at the notes, you'll see that one of the notes is the Muguet note Mahonial, which is a captive, a Givaudan captive that was supposed to...
That's like a sandalwood captive.
Well, it was supposed to replace like Lyral and Lilial, but like realistically nothing does, right? So
yeah,
that was the idea, one of the ideas. It was one of these Muguet notes that they were trying to develop.
And by the way, thank you for pronouncing that correctly. There's so many times. This is where I have difficulty pronouncing the French word for Lily of the Valley. But go ahead, Britt. I just had to leave that. I just had to state that. Go ahead, though.
Yeah. Anyway, so there's no big secret there. So it's like the most popular fragrance on Fragrantica And one of the middle notes, it's just like, yeah, we're not going to write Lily of the Valley. We'll just put in the name of the captive from Givaudan. So it's not like a secret, but it gets me curious about, okay, how much time and effort are they putting into this? No one's going to give me a dollar amount, but I'm curious about like the extent of the tie up. So lately I've been sniffing like another interesting thing is this whole weird angel share phenomenon. Like by Killian angel share has spawned a million different things. But one of the products of this Givaudan Latafa tie-up is, besides Kamra, which is like sort of a twist, they did like a straight up, can we go straight up clone, like as close as possible? And they did something called Zikra. It's in the ugliest bottle you've ever seen, unless you find it
Zikra,
attractive.
can you spell that? I'd love to see the bottle.
Zikra. It unfortunately it sounds like a virus you contract while in Brazil, and it
like
causes
Zika.
really. It's bad. It's not a good name. Unless it means something in Arabic, in which case that's not at all something I meant to offend anyone by.
What the hell? I just looked it up.
But here's the thing, though, right?
Go ahead.
You can smell it next to Angel Share, and I'm not an influencer. I couldn't give two fuck. Excuse me. Well, fuck it. I couldn't give two fucks if you buy this or not. I have no stakes here. But it was sort of like, okay, for this one we'll go 1-to-1, and it's pretty 1-to-1. If you look at, so Zara did a clone of Angel Share with Benoit Lapuza, probably fucking up his name. But I don't really necessarily know that he deserves it for me to get it right. So, but anyway, if you look at they fucked up his name on the bottle. He's got an S. His name is, I think, Benoit, but there's an S in there, and they originally misspelled it. Anyway, was it his name they misspelled? So their composition, Zara's composition, where he copied his own fragrance, is like 22% by volume, and the Latafa one, that's like almost a 1-to-1, is like a 20% EDP. Yeah, is a 22% EDP, and the Latafa one's like 20. So like the Latafa one's probably using stronger and better, sort of more powerful things, just to a certain degree, than even the Zara one. So it's interesting to me, just being I'm not in the industry anymore. It's not what I do. But when I know that there's like a business tie-up, I'm curious about how much do they pimp out their perfumery people, to what degree. I'm always interested in original things also. But this other thing is just kind of like an interesting hobby thing. I can't hear anything anymore.
That was because I was muted. Sorry, folks. So I'm reading the description of Mahoniol, and it is described as a delicate, light, fresh, natural, subtle, fragile green, a light, crisp, and green lily of the valley that is the epitome of spring. Its scent is delicate and endearing, with facets of abundantly fresh, natural dimension. So it does seem to be a replacer for what was used, the Lyrol, the Lilial, and to an extent hydroxycitronella, which is now restricted but not banned.
So I don't think any of the perfumers likes Mahoniol as a replacement. Just FYI,
they're just not impressed with it. They just don't feel like it's a proper replacement.
No.
I wanted to highlight Catherine's question here. What do you call the phenomenon of a particular note becoming consistently stronger than it should be? I experienced it with cedarwood. Let me tell you something, Catherine. It's not natural cedarwood that's doing that. It's like those very heavy molecular weight synthetics like Isoe Super and Timber Silk and Timberol and Norlimbinol, etc. And because they have a heavy molecular weight and there's some sort of there's something about them chemically that just lodges into your olfactory receptors and lasts that's just what happens. I don't really know if there's an exact single word for that phenomenon, but it does fall into that woody amber realm, even though a lot of them, people just kind of wholesale refer to them as woody ambers, but they don't all necessarily smell ambery. They could just smell like excessively woody. So yeah, I mean that's as best of an answer that I can give to that. But it is definitely something that can fatigue the nose after a while, which is why people complain about it so much. We have a really active chat, Gabe. Um, we have actually a question here from Justin C. Gabe, before your book came out, how difficult was it to get access to interviewing these perfumers and houses and getting interviews scheduled with them?
So Givaudan, I'm probably mispronouncing everything.
Givaudan, you're pretty much on the mark.
I can speak Spanish. I was at one point pretty conversational in Japanese and can still understand it really well and probably speak it a little. My French pronunciation is awful. I can say super and magnifique, but that's it. So Givaudan kind of dropped the ball in that I was able to make one-on-one meetings with all the perfumers I basically wanted to. And then by the time that their corporate media person got around to talking to me about, hey, here's how we want to negotiate access, I had already spoken to all of the perfumers. IFF, people always told me IFF runs like a company on a stock exchange where everything is about the stock price and everything is measured and everything is it's all about metrics and hitting like numbers and stuff. And that was what I was told. And it was kind of true. Like the IFF person who handled my interviews, awesome person, really, really great. Actually, maybe out of all of these people, like if I think about who she is and like what I've seen of her since, maybe one of the best people in the industry I met. But like I asked for access to perfumers to talk to them about their lives, their formulations, their thoughts about the industry, etc. And rather than like reply and say, sure, or maybe, or we need to put some guardrails on this, she sent me a schedule of here are your times for interviewing these 6 America-based perfumers. Here are your times for interviewing these 6 French-based perfumers. It was like a whole schedule she made for me. I don't even remember if I had given her dates. I don't think I had. It was so regimented and rigid. It was really open because she gave me 12 perfumers, including, Dominique Ropion and Anne Filippo. Like she wasn't holding back. And the only thing that I would say though is I could ask them whatever I wanted, but she was a critic of my questions. So for instance, I wanted to ask Anne Filippo about someone who had passed away and the effect it had had on her. And I was asking very serious questions a lot of the time. So it wasn't like, oh, Gabe's a jokester, but now he's inserting something serious that'll just blow her away. It wasn't out of nowhere. There was a reason for it. And I got an email immediately back from the IFF woman saying, if you ask about the person who passed away, you'll be shut down by Anne. She won't want to talk about it. It's terrible memories. However, if you really want to go deep with Anne, she's got this deep childhood passion, hobby, pastime thing with playing the organ in a Baroque church. And I was like, wait, what? And I was like, okay, this is weird. I don't like taking notes in advance on my questions as a journalist. And I think I did maybe ask about eventually this woman who passed away anyway, but I asked about the organ and I got this whole story about how Anne Filippo's growing up and playing organ in this like very Baroque church in a certain part of France was this huge part of her creative kind of formative years. And it wound up being a really great topic to open her up and a really good question. So the IFF woman was super regimented, super kind of strict in a way, but very helpful, very open. Firmenich was hard to crack. their media person basically was sort of like, who the F are you, for quite a while. He was young and sophisticated, and I tried to win him over with proving my seriousness about pursuing this topic. I did it a bunch of different ways. I told him things he didn't know himself about his own company, about his own perfumers. But ultimately, the last thing, the straw that broke the camel's back, was obviously they got a lot of their jasmine from the Tamil Nadu region of India. And I was very big into watching Tamil films. Tamil films are not like Bollywood films. Southern India and Northern India are different culturally and linguistically. And Tamil films are often, they have a hero. Their main hero is a guy, they call him superstar or Taleva, which means leader. And his name's Rajinikanth. He's like 70 something, but he still acts as if he's 30 or 40. He looks amazing. He puts on a wig and he looks super young. His last movie, Vitayan, was a little bit of a disappointment. Regardless, what broke the camel's back is I said to this Firmenich dude, here's where you're getting a lot of your jasmine from. Now, let me tell you the best recent Tamil movie I saw. And I now rated him the plot of this movie called Thadam, where basically this guy's thrown in prison and he's dead to rights. Everyone has seen this dude commit a crime, and he's caught on camera, and there's a million genetic things that might link him to this particular murderous crime. But I'm going to, spoiler alert, I'm spoiling the movie. Suddenly, there appears in the jail another person who looks exactly like the dude that they've imprisoned for this crime, because, of course, he's got an identical twin. And because they are not fraternal twins, but identical twins, their DNA is going to be shared also. And there was only one person seen. And so it's impossible without any sort of confession or further investigation that would yield the difference to know which of the two committed this particular crime. And so do you convict two people when you know only one of them did it? Do you convict none of them? How do you go about prosecuting such a crime? And getting so deep into this particular Tamil movie, I just overwhelmed the dude. I think at that point he's just like, fuck it. And so then Firmenich said, yeah, we'll you can talk to our dudes. And that was really great. The only Firmenich perfumer that it wasn't unfortunate. I mean, it was a good interview, but Fabrice Pellegrin, I'm going to screw up his name. He required an English translator, or I required a French translator. Depends what.
I'll help you out, Pellegrin.
Yeah, exactly right. So I couldn't say that. I
have people who have helped me out, so
I couldn't say that, and he didn't want to do it in English, so that was a barrier. Yeah, I mean, there the Givaudan perfumer. I hope I don't screw up his last name. Rest in peace, Olivier Péchu.
Péchu, yeah, you did that right.
He was so this was during COVID. Some of the interviews, like Aliénor Massenet and some other ones, were in person, but then COVID hit, and so things just got all video for a while. And then then as soon as we were allowed to travel again, I went, because France had a travel ban. I flew to France's travel ban to external humans was lifted June 8th, and I flew June 9th, 2021 into Paris. So I saw people in person eventually, not all of them, but on video, Olivier Péchu, we went for hours. He talked about his cooking. I got to ask him, I'm very big into sports. So he had done a celebrity fragrance for the soccer player, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who's they make fun of him on Ted Lasso. There's a Zava character. So I got to ask him about him hanging out with Zlatan, because they did spend some time together. It was a far-ranging, really interesting chat. And I think Olivier Péchu told me about him playing the piano also. And the whole time, I didn't know he was battling cancer. He was. He told me, he alluded to having cut back on his schedule, but he's battling, like, he's literally battling cancer during this whole convo. But he was a Givaudan guy where, and he had spent earlier in his career, I don't know how some of these perfumers have the wherewithal to kind of fight for a job. There are so few jobs, and
Yeah.
to get one, you have to climb the ranks. So Olivier
Cutthroat.
Pichou was originally in the Bangkok office. I don't even think it was, maybe it was Givaudan, could have been a different company. Let's just say it was Givaudan, but he was in Bangkok for quite a while, and it was hot and steamy and gross. And I asked him, like, how do you even make perfume when the environment is so humid? And
Humid.
yeah,
Sticky.
I mean, like, just how did you survive like a year and a half in Bangkok? And he was, he went off and told me about all the wonders of Thai cuisine. So that was wide ranging, and there was literally nobody at Givaudan who had any idea at the time that he and I were just like chatting. I think later on, when Givaudan became aware, they helped set me up with Khalees Becker. She, during COVID, went to her horse farm. She got horses. I mean, I guess she lives with them anyway because she's in the south of France running Givaudan's perfumery school. But I think there was like a horse near her during the interview. Like, she might have been outside. They might have been aware of that one. But Givaudan, like, I kind of felt like a kid in a candy shop, and the person who runs the candy shop is like across the street yelling at some other kids. So I just sort of snuck in and did what I could. Yeah, it was really sad when Olivier died, Olivier Pichou, because he was so sweet and clearly very, very talented and humble. And we probably spoke for like hours and hours, and he had no obligation to. I was nobody to him. And Thai cuisine, everything. And it's weird. It's weird to find out. This happened to me. I wrote a book on boxing. It came out in 2014. And there was a boxing trainer who the entire time I knew him, for like 4 years, was suffering from cancer. The difference is that this guy, this old boxing trainer, was afraid of doctors. So he never went for checkups. So by the time he found out he had cancer himself, it was terminal and it was too late. But he didn't know. So neither of us
like
knew.
Metastasized, right?
Yeah. So, but our entire relationship was happening on like borrowed time, but he didn't know it. Olivier Pichou actually knew that he was sort of, I mean, he was fighting it, but I think he kind of knew it wasn't going that well at the fight when we spoke. So it's weird in retrospect that he gave me time, because his time was really limited. Like, we're all limited. That's what makes life interesting. The time is finite, but like,
yeah.
Why did he give me time? I'm an asshole. Yeah.
Oh, de parfum. Oh, de parfum. Hi there. Is this gentleman a perfumer? No, he's not a perfumer per se. But
I'm not a perfumer in any way, shape, or form. I'm
per
strictly a
se.
journalist.
I know. I'm like, per se, like, not at all, not at all. Oh, de parfum. Is that sort of a dig at Robe Zoe? Because I know that he has a very inflected way of saying parfum in French.
But don't make me part of that. I happen to like that guy.
I think he's a very nice guy. But
hold on, wait, back up for a second. I believe, right, Robes 08 is from the French part of Canada, where
Indeed.
they speak French with a different dialect than French people do.
So I think that it is a little bit more inflected. It is inflected differently than in France. You know, there's a different dialect really to the Quebecois.
But but he's not being a poseur. Like, it's totally
no, he's not
legitimate.
being a poseur at all.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure.
Okay, just making
no,
sure.
I'm just putting this person on blast for that, because I know that that's like an ongoing joke.
Is it? I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Jean-Qui sent hello, scent of the day, Dolce Vita Parfum, Parfait. We already shared that one. Catherine, I just wanted to say again, thank you very much for contributing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Poseur. Yes, Justin. A poseur. And we got another. No other comments there. Sorry about that, Gabe. I was just struck by that. That comment there. We're at 8:02 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If anybody does have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Also, we're going to do a check on the like count right now. We are at 29. I'd like to aim for 50 by the end of this stream, which will be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're at 29 right now. We have a little ways to go to reach that goal. So anybody who hasn't already liked the stream, please be sure to do so. I'd love to reach that goal. Gabe, I want to pick your brain about this new book because this is a diversion for those who may have expected something similar to the Ghost Perfumer. Now, what I really like is the origin of this book itself. Can you tell us a little bit about what prompted you to write? And I have the book right here to share. I'm going to show it to everyone right now. I have it right here. This right here. Tell
New York
us.
City, yes. New York City Love Triangle, 1931. Now available on the internet to all humans in paperback, hardback, audiobook, ebook, Kindle Unlimited. New York City Love Triangle, 1931. And the origin of the story is pretty wild. At the end of
I was reading about that, and I love it. Tell us about it.
At the end of 2023, the woman who is the president of the board of the apartment building that I live in, which is a cooperative building, it's a specific kind of apartment building in New York. It just basically sort of means that you own shares in a corporation instead of your apartment itself, and the shares entitle you to the apartment. It's sort of an interesting kink in New York real estate. It's if you look in New York, if you want to like buy an apartment, you can buy a condo or a co-op, and they're different, even though they're both boxes in the naked city of 8 million people. Anyway, at the end of 2023, the co-op board president, a lady who's lived here for many decades, lovely woman, Barbara, she sent out an email to the entire building, all 45 units. It's 15-floor building. There's 3 units on every floor. Do the math. Saying, hey, in 2024, this edifice will be 100 years old. It opened in 1924. And by the way, has been very little changed since then. Would someone like to research the history of our building, namely the architect who worked on it, Rosario Candela, is somewhat of a famous architect and actually a famous dude. During World War II, this architect worked as a cryptographer or as a code breaker for the U.S. in World War II. He was an Italian immigrant to America, and he worked as a code breaker for the U.S. against his home country, among others, during World War II. So very interesting obituary if you want to read about Rosario Candela. But the board president said, do you want to look up the history of the building? Obviously, the architect is an interesting person, but also who's lived here and what's happened in the halls of this building over the course of 100 years. And I was the most avid person to raise my hand or to send an email in and say, I would like to research this because I'm into old newspaper clippings and old stories and humanity that has passed through halls that I now pass through. So, and by the way, mind you, I'm filming this from this very building, which is now 100 years old because we just turned 100 in 2024. So we're in our 105th year, or 101st year, excuse me. So I'm in that very building right now. So I wrote back and said, yes, I'll look up who's lived here and what they've done. And to make a longer story short, I found some interesting humans. One of them had come up with a gas mask for people with respiratory problems. So if you were an asthmatic, but you needed to put on a gas mask because of some sort of release of toxic chemicals, he invented that. He's got a patent for it. He also has a patent for a method of making kombucha. He's something of a famous inventor. And toward the end of his life, he really worked a lot in using various fungi, various fungal things for medical and other chemical applications. He was kind of considered an inventor genius with an emphasis in fungus. There was another person who lived here who was the best college tennis player in all of America in 1928. Interesting. Many of you, some of you, I don't know, may have seen on the Netflix recently the biopic with Annette Bening playing the swimmer Diana Nyad, who famously in real life swam from Cuba to Florida. She lived in this building for a decade.
Oh, really?
So there were all these people who, over the course of 100 years, had interesting stories and had lived here. Thanks, Josh, for starting the book. I appreciate it. The person who lived, I live on the second floor. The person who lived in my exact apartment, the one I'm sitting in right now, in the 1930s, was a dentist. His name was Bernard Waldman. That's not so interesting. What is interesting is he was one of the first like CSI people in New York. If a body washed up on Coney Island and they couldn't identify it, they brought in this dentist to use dental records and look at the person's teeth to see if they could maybe make some sort of forensic matchup and identify an unidentified corpse. So this proto CSI guy who was a dentist but used his dental skills to identify corpses, he lived in my apartment. All interesting. And we made a little museum exhibit in the lobby, kind of rotated, so people could see who had preceded them in these somewhat hallowed halls. But there was one story I didn't put in the museum, because when I came across it, I was like, holy shit, this story should be a book. And I made it that. In the summer of 1931, I saw that a woman living in our building, a 25-year-old painter who had already had her work shown in the New York Times, who had already had a solo gallery show on West 57th Street, who had trained in Paris, whose teachers had been the same teachers as Georgia O'Keeffe and Norman Rockwell, a legitimate painter of great talent who specialized in portraiture, not society portraiture. She really did people on the streets. She'd go up to Harlem. She'd go down to Chinatown. She wanted to capture the essence of people on the street. She also painted a lot of theater people. So her paintings, she painted an actress, a Broadway actress, and the painting was hung in the New Amsterdam Theater on Broadway. She sketched Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the sketch was hung in the New York Public Library. So quite an accomplished artist. I saw that she lived in this building in 1931. And that summer, she had been called down from her mountainside camp, where she was sort of running a camp for the summer, back to New York City for a police interrogation, which is interesting. Read more. So I did. The police interrogation was about the following. The previous night, in a doctor's office in Brooklyn, the doctor being the son of a tremendously famous Yiddish actor who was not just famous on the Lower East Side, but was covered by Variety magazine in like Hollywood. He was a known entity. His name was Boris Tomaszewski. His son, Dr. Milton Tomaszewski, was a doctor and something of a Lothario, seemingly, who maybe or maybe not, for 5 years, had a situationship where he was diddling his assistant / nurse. They would go in rides. They would go on these motor coach rides and park and make out. And he would lavish maybe jewelry on her. And they would go to the theater, and he would take her to his apartment, which he shared with his mother, which is a sort of strange thing to do for a lover. But he had done all of these things seemingly. And then in the summer of 1931, he maybe had fallen in love with this painter, having met her in the Adirondacks, which is a mountain range up in New York State. On July 4th, literally, he had been introduced to this beautiful painter who had lived in my building, and she'd been trained in Paris. And it was hot and heavy, apparently. But the doctor had to come back to New York. And so he did. And when he did come back to New York, the woman who was still up in upstate New York and this doctor, the painter, they exchanged letters, they exchanged phone calls. And who was intercepting them but the nurse who had been diddled with for 5 years. This caused the nurse much consternation and angst. And on top of all of that, about 6 months earlier, the nurse had showed her sister a diamond solitaire engagement ring. And we don't know who bought that ring, whether she bought it for herself and tried to maybe convince the doctor to upgrade their relationship, or the doctor bought it for her. On the other hand, where did she get the money to buy that expensive diamond? She also had, besides that, this Ford coupe that she probably couldn't have afforded on her own, but okay. The nurse intercepts the communiques, and in so doing, a rage develops within her, and she finds herself either by slipping in or maybe after a late night bed and breakfast session with this doctor, she finds herself putting a cloth that is covered in ether and anesthetizing the doctor, and then taking out a scalpel and beginning a procedure, the end of which, had she gone through with it, would have been the removal of his genitalia. Now,
my God.
she makes some incisions, but it proves to be an overwhelming thing for her. The blood, the notion that he'll no longer have a penis. And so she stops and she bandages him. And apparently she slips away. And of course, the next morning, the guy awakens, the doctor, and he sees that by his crotch, there are open wounds. They've been sutured, but not very well. And later that night in his office, the doctor confronts the nurse and says, I know it was you who slit my, groin area. Let me tell you a couple of things. Number one, you're fired. That might not have been the first thing he said. Could have been number two. He said two things. One was, you're fired. The other thing was, we're never getting married. We are never, ever getting married. Now, let me tell you something. Later on, the doctor will tell people, no, the nurse had no expectation that we were ever going to have a relationship. I never did anything with this nurse. We never got Randy. It's a very strange thing to admit two things at once. One, after a woman came at you with a scalpel to your nether regions, you said to her you're not going to marry her. And two, there were never plans to be married to this woman. Those things don't cohere. Regardless, he says another thing to this woman. He says, we're not going to marry. Also, you're fired. And then the doorbell rings at the doctor's office. The doorbell rings and the doctor rises to get it. He turns his back so that the nurse is behind him and he's reaching for the door. The nurse reaches into her drawer, into her desk, and pulls out a revolver. She aims it at the doctor's back. She fires once, and then turning the gun on herself, first at her womb area and then at her skull, she fires twice more. Bang, bang, bang. And for this reason, the crime scene having yielded at that moment in time a lot of blood, two bodies on the floor, both of which were sent to the hospital, one of which was DOA, one of which was a paralyzed body. For this reason, the painter who lived in my building was called in for a police interrogation because it became quickly apparent to the police and to the district attorney of Kings County, Brooklyn, which is where the doctor's office was, even though the nurse lived in Manhattan, even though the nurse lived in the very building I'm sitting in right now, it became very quickly apparent to the DA that this was a love triangle. In fact, he says that to the New York Times. And so if it is a love triangle and one person's dead and one person's in a coma having been paralyzed, well, there's only a third person to talk to. That third person lived in my building. She was the painter, Norma Jean Bernstein. And when I realized, in the history of my building, there was a tremendous love triangle that not just involved these three people, mind you, but three people who came from very prominent families because the doctor's parents were famous actors. The nurse's dad had been the assistant to the chief of police for all of New York City and was a major Republican. And the painter's father was a former Democratic New York State assemblyman who had become elected as a Democratic judge. So you have these huge politicians and a major entertainment figure in the parental sphere, and then the love triangle among their children that becomes near suicidal. Not near suicidal. That becomes suicidal and near murderous and very, very messy. And front page news in every tabloid and broadsheet in all of Gotham for days. So when I found out that happened in the history of my own building that I'm living in right now, I decided I'm not going to tell anyone in my building about this. I'm just going to write the book. And when it comes out, I'll tell them then. And so that's what I did.
Now, Gabe, you've made sure not to give too many spoilers. It's sort of you are leading on, but you're not giving it all up because we need to read that book to find out more about what had happened there. It kind of reminds me of when I was a kid and I used to watch those little. There was this gentleman who used to. He would read parts of like a classic, story for children, and he would draw, some scenes from it, but you wouldn't necessarily give out the whole story. So you're giving us just sort of a little taste of it, but we need to read the book to really find out what happened, right?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, God, here's the thing. The thing is I actually didn't set out to write anything other than what I found. And the thing that I found in this case was that there's like three different elements, and I did my best to mix them, and I probably failed. But there's this true crime element, which, is visceral and gaudy and tawdry and fun. And also maybe, oh, I should say one thing. To write this book, I visited the descendants and relatives of all three people in this love triangle. So I visited the people who are living, their family tree, people. I went to their houses and looked at diaries and photos and mementos and keepsakes and love letters and everything that had been preserved and saved since 1931. And the beautiful thing about the families is they all recognized that what had happened was such a colossal collision of forces that we should save this stuff. So they had, which made my research easier than if it had not been there. But that's kind of what I discovered, that besides the true crime, there really is a story here about three families that had nothing to do with each other, but were all kind of very New York in their own way. And then there's something about New York where it's sort of like when people collide like that, you don't expect it, but then after it happens, it kind of feels like, oh, maybe it was always supposed to happen that way, that these families were supposed to kind of become so entangled. Maybe that's just a romantic way of looking at history. But I mean, at least from the nurse's family descendant side, because she was the shooter, they have this desire they have a desire to make amends and apologize and like let the other sides know that they sort of feel bad, even though they understand a little bit about the rage that their own forebear felt when she was seemingly spurned. So the book is true crime, but it's really also like, I don't want to say family history because that sounds not exciting and no one will read it if I say it like that. But kind of like digging into how this happens, these intersections, these intertwinings. And then the third component is there's art history there, because I think this painter was effing good and her work deserves to transcend this scandal. Like, no one has heard of the portrait painter Norma Jean Bernstein. And I don't think that I can personally change that, but I hope that anyone who reads the book comes away, because it cost money to do it in a way that was unfortunate, because like, it's money that you spend and you don't get exactly what you want. But to the best that we could, you get color reproductions of these beautiful canvases. And so I hope anyone who does read the book comes away thinking, fuck, that painter could paint, separate from the fact that she was caught up in a crazy love scandal. And by the way, even after the love scandal, there's some interesting stuff. This painter's life is interesting. She meets this kind of, how do I explain it? Like this guy who sort of wines and dines her. He's made all his money in the shoe business, but he like kind of has society at his beck and call to some degree. He kind of like he's friends. Okay, he's friends with the great grandfather of Armie Hammer, the actor turned like cannibalist cancel culture guy. But he's also friends with the heir to the X-Lax laxative fortune. Regardless, at one of the parties that this guy takes the painter to, they meet Albert Einstein, and she winds up painting Albert Einstein. It's pretty cool. It's in the book. It's a pretty cool painting. It's a very rough. She was very big on using the palette knife. There's a lot of impasto. It's pretty rough, but it's
like
pretty
the very
great.
for folks who are watching impasto, like the very thick layers of the paint to create sort of like yeah, like.
So that's the book, and I came upon it strictly because someone had said, look up the history of the building in which you live.
Wow, that is something to have that much history and to have that many different types of personalities living. I mean, I guess, being New York City after all. But that's really fascinating. I'm glad that I picked up your book, and I think that many of you should. Here it is. And I did share the link in the chat for you to purchase it. So that is New York City Love Triangle, 1931, A Tale of Three Families. So you can check that out at the Amazon link there. It is now time for me to apply my scent of the evening, which just so happens to be from Lush.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called Rentless. Is anybody familiar with this in the chat? It is called Rentless. So that is my scent of the evening. We're going to take a look at the chat here. Is Ghost Perfumer in audiobook format?
Yeah, no, that one isn't. There's a complicated reason that I won't get into why that one isn't, but it's not, and I'm really, really sorry.
All right, we made it to 40 likes. Let's try to hit 50 likes by the end of the live stream, which will be at approximately 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we're looking at about 35 minutes. Scott says cannibal cancel culture heir to the X-Lax fortune. Yeah.
Well, those were separate people. So there's this guy named Armie
clarify
Hammer.
That. Clarify.
Yeah, who's the great grandfather to Armie Hammer, and then you got this other guy named Sidney Matz who had X-Lax money, big X-Lax money. Can't make this stuff up. I mean,
I'd
you
love
could,
to have
but it
some
would
of
be
that
really
X-Lax
silly.
money.
Yeah.
Famous YouTuber sounds like a season of American Horror Story.
Two things about that famous YouTuber. I don't know if you're related to Richard Pryor or not, but that's a great photo. Probably you're not related. If you are related, however, please tell his relations I like Richard Pryor. And also, yes, I would like Ryan Murphy to do something with this. This could be a great season of American Horror Story. Jubilation 25. That's very nice. It's very nice.
Wait, Duncan says he sees 49 likes. I only see 40, but I'd love it if it were actually 49 likes. Or are you just fucking around with me here? And Dave says, no problem, Gabe. Thanks for answering.
No, the truth is it is a problem. There should be an audiobook, but in the year 2021, I made a deal with the devil, maybe. I don't know if I can say that. I did something I maybe shouldn't have done on a piece of paper, signing my name. And as a result, the audiobook of that is not something that I can maybe make happen like this. Whereas I know now not to sign. We both don't light yourself on fire, please. Yeah, don't be lighting yourself on fire.
No. All right, Gabe, tell us a bit about DCU. I'm going to share some information with the chat here about DCU. So tell us about this.
So DCU stands for Deep Crime Unit, and then there's a Japanese subtitle that translated means divers with handcuffs. Basically, I came up with the idea for a TV procedural show where the cops do all their work underwater. It's where you focus on the scuba cops, because that's a real thing. That New York City, for instance, has a team of scuba cops. And long story short, the show got picked up in Japan, and it aired in Japan. But now you can watch it in America. So there's a streaming service called Tubi, and there's subtitles in English, and you can watch the Japanese show Deep Crime Unit, Divers with Handcuffs, starring Hiroshi Abe, who's a great actor. And it's just a silly sort of underwater cop show. Oh, there's a bomb in the bridge in the prefect of Gunma. But the show traveled the world, and we had producers from different countries. But I co-created a Japanese drama that aired on Sunday nights in Japan. Nichiyobi is Sunday. And it was on Tokyo Broadcasting System, or TBS. And now it streams in America on Tubi. So it's unrelated to perfumery. It's unrelated to my current book. It was just a thought that there had been a lot of permutations of cop shows, but I had never seen one underwater where the cops were doing the work underwater all the time. So I wanted to see underwater cops. That was basically it. And yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time in the Bronx. There's a part of the Bronx called City Island. It's an actual island, and there's a retired police scuba diver there, and he had real stories. And the scuba cops do an amazing thing in New York. Like, you wouldn't think of this, but if anyone who's been to New York knows, the UN is in a section of New York that's called Turtle Bay, and it's on the east side, and it's right on the water. The scuba cops will go underneath like Turtle Bay and like just make sure there are no bombs there, which is in the Japanese show. Again, this was all supposed to be in New York, but it was made in Japan, so it takes place like off the coast of Yokohama. But it's New York scuba cops, because we actually have that, and there it's just a TV show. And so they do other things. When TWA Flight 800 crashed, it was the scuba cops who were going down and looking for pieces of wreckage in Jamaica Bay. There was in 2014, there was an autistic student named Devante Akendo who walked out of his public school and disappeared seemingly into the water. And they sent the scuba cops after him. So the scuba cops kind of have this very cool, interesting mandate, which is like, they're really good in the deep. And I was just like, we should do that. I co-created a Japanese show.
That's really something. Thank God. I have it geared up here to play.
I would urge anyone, if you think, oh, that Gabe, he's a nice guy, I'd like to remunerate him. I will just tell you the book is a far more remunerative exercise than the TV show that I co-created. But I did co-create the TV show. It's totally true. Yep, that's the name.
Deep Crime Unit. And you can watch that, folks, on Tubi. I shared the link above here in the chat. You can check that out. That will be some new binge watching for me.
Yeah, let me say something. There was someone who earlier mentioned American Horror Story. No one's saying this is going to captivate you like a Ryan Murphy show. Like, if you think that this is going to be anywhere comparable to the Aaron Hernandez show, or who was the dude who had sex with skulls? The Jeffrey Dahmer show.
Who is the dude who had sex with skulls?
It's not going to be that good. It's not that. No one's saying it's going to be that good at all. Just it's a Japanese procedural, and it follows a lot of Japanese norms. Would you believe that in the very beginning, there's a baby in the water who's saved by a scuba cop, and then they wind up working together years later on the same scuba cop team? Would you believe it? So let's just be clear. Gabe had an idea for a show, and he brought it to the people, and the show got made. But no one's saying it's like the Jeffrey Dahmer show, where it's eerie, and you have the smart neighbor who's like, his apartment smells like flesh. Someone should probably look into this. And then the cops don't, like, or the Menendez brothers. It's not as gripping. It's not.
Folks, remember that buying one cup of coffee is only $5. I mean, you're probably spending more money on a cup of coffee each day. And if you want me to continue to bring this kind of content, that's what it's all about. It's viewer supported content. The more that I'm supported by my viewers, the more I'm willing to continue to do what I do, because YouTube is not giving me very much money for advertising. It's not lucrative. So it's viewers like you. Yes, just like the public broadcasting service, PBS, it's viewers like you that help support this content. So remember, one coffee is $5, but if you do happen to want to purchase 6 cups of coffee, you get a sample pack from me, and 12 cups will get you a 4-bottle grab bag plus a sample pack. Now, remember, that offer is for US, what's the word I'm looking for? US donations only, US viewers only. So if you're outside of the US, just do it out of the goodness of your heart, because that's who you are. The website is buymeacoffee.com/Joseph Kolb P. Thank you.
I do
All right.
like that JJC logo very much.
Oh, thank you very much. That was a very simple thing that I created in DaVinci Resolve. And I happen to like one of the fonts that was in it. So I just put my initials there, and that's how I did it. Folks, if you have any questions, if you have any comments. Oh, there's another comment that had come in. Oh, how wonderful. Thank you very much, Josh. Thank you so much. Now, Josh, let's take a look. I'm going to see here. Ooh, 12 coffees. So did you want a 4-bottle grab bag and a sample pack? Just let me know, and we'll get that geared up for you. Duncan says, I watch a lot of Japanese and Korean dramas with my wife until subtitles make me dizzy and I fall asleep. That's pretty funny. And Josh says he's going to be checking it out. So, how are you feeling, Gabe? I know that you were a little bit under the weather. Are you finding your second wind here?
Yeah. Thanks to viewers like you. No, I'm
viewers
okay.
like you. That's right.
Thanks to viewers like you.
This
No,
is
I'm okay. Thank you for
this is the
asking. I'm
pledge
all right.
drive right now.
Yeah, actually, my throat's a little, I'm a little parched.
Oh, please. It's very important to hydrate. I can't even say hydrate with. No, it reminds me of one of these YouTubers. Excuse me whilst I hydrate. So Gabe, let's take it back to perfume again, because I'm sure there's some folks who want to just have it circle back. They want to circle back to fragrance again. Now, is there any possibility that you would do not necessarily a sequel to the Ghost Perfumer, but to do some other expose or some other exploration on the something that is based on the fragrance community? Would you do another book like that or something similar to it?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that if I learned anything right from the story of how this last book came about, it's sort of, if something catches my interest, I definitely write it, right? Like, so the Pierre Bourdon thing was like mind-boggling to me, that you could create for Creed secretly for like 30 years, and it felt like his story needed to be told. And then this woman who lived in my building, who was a painter and part of a deadly love triangle, it felt like it needed to be told. You know, the merger of Firmenich and DSM, so that now Firmenich is a public company, that doesn't need to be told by me. It was interesting to me when the feds here and also in Europe raided IFRA and Givaudan and IFF and Firmenich and Simrise, because they're pursuing an antitrust investigation. That was interesting to me. It wouldn't be the first time that they were, busted for coordinating prices on ingredients and essentially being monopolizing the market by setting aside clients and divvying things up in a illegal way. But even that is not interesting enough for me to do a book. I think someone's personal story would have to really sort of stick out. There are humans in the industry I really like who have lives that I'd love to spend time in. Like Geza Shane in Berlin is an interesting dude with an interesting life, beautiful,
Mm.
beautiful family, his wife and his daughter. And at least for me, in my interactions with him, someone that I can really talk life philosophy with, who's kind of steered me right. Same thing with the retired Firmenich perfumer like Harry Fremont.
Oh, yes,
He might
yes.
be one of the most thoughtful, kind, generous, interesting humans I came across. He now lives on a vineyard in Northern California now that he's sort of retired from perfumery. But yeah, I
Now,
mean,
if people are interested in knowing what Harry Fremont's portfolio is, let's see
well,
here.
he's sort of with Pierre in that he and Pierre pioneered the '90s and the late '80s. So
He
Pierre
worked
did
on
cool.
Aramis New West.
Right.
That was
So
one.
Pierre did Cool Water, and then he did really New West, and New West for him was with its Kalone what Cool Water was with dihydromercenol, and
Yeah.
so the aquatic '90s are really ushered in by those two guys. But Harry did everything. I mean, he did Purple Label for Ralph Lauren, and I think he was a part of. Was Harry a part of Grey Vetiver for Tom Ford? I think he was.
He did
But Harry's
some
been a part of
interesting
everything.
things. He did a flanker. He did a flanker for Quorum. He did Aqua Quorum. He did a number of things for Avon, for Banana Republic, Calvin Klein. I'm trying to think of one really good one that he did. He worked with Xenia too. He did a number of the ones for the Xenia exclusives. Oh, Catalyst for Men, which is a lovely, lovely fragrance from Halston that was discontinued about 12 years ago. He did that one. He did the Michael for Men, Michael Kors for Men. Let's see. He worked with Tom Ford too. He did Grey Vetiver, Noir de Noir as well. So he did
Yeah.
a lot of lovely stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Harry's the man. But I mean that the thing is like
Post sport.
you get the guys that like Harry worked with at Firmenich, like the Alberto Moriases, the ones who sort of become like they decide to become celebrities. That's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But Harry's just not. He's just down to earth and accessible and sweet. But yeah, I mean, yeah. Look, no, I think my problem is I actually love the fragrance world now. It's this universe I'm familiar with, and familiarity breeds of kind of affection. So um, it would be weird of me to never write about it again. But I also don't want to just do it for the sake of doing it. And I don't want to just write a book about the people I love. There's someone who wrote some perfume books years ago now, and you can sort of see where the person ran out of new stuff or newness to do. So I would never want that. And I also the other problem, it's a little bit of a problem, I suppose, is the Ghost Perfumer took people by surprise, but like now, if I were to approach someone and they Googled me, they're gonna have maybe their guard up a little. It depends on who the person is. If I know them already, not so much. But yeah, no, the doors open. People tell me all the time. I mean, there's a brand named Kriegler. They have a shop in the Plaza in Manhattan.
Yeah.
They
I've been to
claim a
that
super
shop.
old history, and
They do.
people.
It kind of reminded me of Creed in that respect because there really isn't much evidence of
No,
all of this history at all. And
No,
their
there isn't.
perfumes are really expensive for what they are. Yeah.
Yeah. So someone was saying, why don't you look into Kriegler? And I did a little bit, maybe to satisfy my own curiosity first and foremost. But even if it almost feels like doing to Kriegler, look, I'm not saying anything bad or bad about Kriegler, but if hypothetically Kriegler became like the new Creed in a new book, how new is that? It kind of feels like the same book. Not that I'm saying anything. I'm not saying anything about Kriegler. I didn't do enough research.
And Kriegler is definitely a little bit more, esoteric than Creed. Honestly, it's very much they don't have the same sort of notoriety necessarily.
No, I'll just say something right now that pisses me off. It has nothing to do with writing a new book, but one of these influencers, I never even heard of the dude, to be honest. I think he's very big on TikTok, but I caught his video on Instagram.
They all suck on TikTok. All of them.
They probably do. They probably do. I saw the video on Instagram though. This dude, he summarizes my book, and the Ghost Perfumer, and like all the things that I discovered about Pierre and various things, and Creed, and very specific stuff. I mean, there was suspicion that Creed wasn't what it said it was, but there are specific things that nobody knew. Like there were a couple people who had suspicions and a little evidence. One of them was Luca Turin, and I was in touch with him when I was writing the book. But like then there was stuff that Luca didn't know.
He said some flattering things about the Ghost Perfumer.
Yeah. I love Luca. Luca was so kind to me. He's a good editor. But there was stuff when I was reporting it when I found it out, it was news not just to me, but even to Luca, and nobody knew it. And this influencer referenced that stuff. Anyway, it wasn't me, I got tagged, but someone wrote to him and said, if you're going to do a video like this, just at the end of it, credit Gabe Oppenheim with doing the research or whatever. I don't know. And I saw.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about, and he is so suspicious to me. I know who you're talking about, and he has a perfume brand, and he has grown exponentially out of fucking nowhere, and his name begins with a T, and it makes you think of an animal. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
So I wrote.
Who you're talking about?
I wrote a private message to him at first, and I just said, look, I don't know you. You don't know me. I have no personal animus. But some of the stuff you mentioned is very specific, and it's just it just wasn't in the public sphere before I came up with it. If you're going to tell people about it, it would be great to get credit, not because I'm a credit whore, but just because the whole book is about giving credit to people. It feels a little weird that like, you've done a book video without mentioning.
I remember seeing this, and I remember he sort of backpedaled a bit, and he said, "Oh, I love your book. Yes, I thought it was awesome." But he didn't. He refused to give credit where it was due, and admit that he had learned of some of this information through your book.
Well,
I know.
These are
seeing this.
The private message, but you haven't seen the private messages. So in the private message, I said to him, look, man, you're probably I don't actually think this, but I was being kind. I'm like, you're probably a great person. You're probably working with a bunch of things at a bunch of different times. But that guy's comment about credit feels kind of on the money to me. I'm sure you understand where I'm coming from, like love and seriously, like, hugs and kisses, nothing but love, Gabe, right? Period. That was like, it was a super kind, non-judgmental message. And he wrote back totally privately, and I would never reveal a private message if he hadn't been such an ass. None of the stuff that I said had ever been private, had ever been unknown. It was always public knowledge. You didn't discover anything. Nothing in your book was new. Nothing in your book was new. You reported nothing new. Now, Now that's insane because I'm pretty sure that this guy had no idea that Zest Mandarin Pamplemousse was done by Bernard Elena. He just didn't. I'm sure he didn't. And that's fine. Who gives a fuck? He doesn't have to know that. But for him to write a message to me when I spent years writing this book and reporting it, saying none of your reporting is new. This was all in the public sphere beforehand.
No.
That's what he wrote to me privately. It was really offensive. I just left it at that. I mean, I think I wrote back and said, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's verifiably untrue, but you can have it your way if you want, because it's weird to be so unethical. Like, I just thought he would say, oh, my bad, I didn't realize I didn't get it.
But this
is
an
easy
world. This is the realm that we live in now, where there is no compass for ethics. There is no compass for ethics. If you can take advantage of whatever information, whatever that you can grab and create content out of it, you can do everything that you can to gaslight people into thinking that you know what you're talking about, and that what you drew this from information that was, in the domain, that it was publicly available for years. Like, it just doesn't surprise me at all. And I found him to be really suspicious from very early on when I ran into him, and it really weirds me out. I don't know. Does anybody
Dude has
else?
like tens of thousands of followers, and it doesn't give you hope for the world that people are being followed like that.
No. Does anybody who is watching, is anybody familiar with this personality? Because I've really early on, I tried to reach out to him to communicate and ask what his deal is and see if I could interview him. I was going to invite him onto Effluvium, but he's got an agenda. This is somebody with an agenda, and this is not uncommon on TikTok. But I'd be curious as to whether there are people who are watching right now who are familiar. I left his name on there. I'm not going to mention it, but it's in the chat. Do you know anything about this dude? Like, what's his story? Where did he come from? How did he, like, he's becoming a perfumer as well, and he is become so viral, and people actually see him as this, this authority now on TikTok. Like, they really think that he is the be all and end all about perfume history, perfume making, you name it. It's really fascinating to me how these personalities can kind of materialize and become authorities without there really necessarily being any kind of,
I don't know who writes the From Pure Ghost blog. The name, I don't know the name of the person.
I don't even know who the name is. I've been quite curious as to who that is. Yeah.
But that person wrote a review of the Ghost Perfumer where the first half is positive and the second half is negative, and it's more of a negative review than a positive review. But I have a great deal of respect for it because it's very well written, and it's very
thoughtful,
and it considers the material, and it's completely ethical in every way.
Right.
And if you
Google, an honest opinion, it's not. Yeah. Right.
If you Google my name, that review comes up earlier in the results, right, than maybe some other reviews that are more positive. But like,
true,
it literally doesn't. I mean, I don't want to say I'm happy about it, but like, to see someone engage with your work honestly I am happy about it.
And thoughtfully too. And
exactly.
And even if it isn't necessarily the most positive and glowing review, that it's much more critical, at least you can tell that person put thought into their own criticisms.
No, it's all so. Just to be clear, like I don't start feuds with people. Like I think that review is very good, even though it's negative. And then what's interesting is when I did the first round of kind of publicity, if you want to call it that, because I really don't like pimping out my work. But if you're writing stuff and it's a world of video and you don't tell people, please read this, it's really hard to get it read. It's just not a world that values words as much as video.
Right.
You got to do some pimping. Anyway, when I was pimping out the Ghost Perfumer the first time, I had only one experience basically at the time with Thierry Vasser, and he had expressed to me what seemed to be a kind of real negativity about being essentially elbowed out of his position at Guerlain by Delphine Julck. Not by her personally, but by the people who are the puppeteers. And I was like, I was sort of like, okay, Thierry, I get it, but maybe don't take it out on me. Like, it feels like you're a little edgy, but it's not my fault. But since then, we've developed a wonderful rapport, and I love Thierry Vasser now. We've been on walks through Central Park together, like in New York.
Oh, really?
Truly.
From what I can tell, he really does have a reverence for the history of the brand, and he wanted to preserve the heritage. Just from what I can tell, his reformulations, his necessary reformulations, are what have kept the spirit and the core of those classics alive. And I hope that Guerlain doesn't do anything to fuck that up in the like in the future.
Okay, well, so the first thing I said though is still true, meaning that Delphine is hands on the wheel. That's just.
Do we trust that she will continue to?
Well, I don't know her well enough to say that we trust her. We don't.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I love Thierry as a human, but if you're saying I hope in the future Thierry keeps Guerlain being Guerlain, the deciders over at LVMH made that decision. That's done already. Like,
it's already okay.
Delphine. That's why Delphine is there, because now it's Delphine's turn. So, and I'm not so. But anyway, but Thierry as a human is wonderful. And one of the things that was sort of amazing when we were walking through Central Park is I tried to make the talk as deep as possible to try to get as much from him as possible during that particular time. And he is so incredibly humble about having been chosen to be the first non-Guerlain perfumer, like officially. I mean, there have been others, but officially sort of like so many people could have been pulled in. And he told me this effing crazy story. I think he drove his BMW like all night to like, he found, I forgot where it was when he got the phone call, but it's some crazy story. And I think it involved him driving a BMW all night. But he went through, he like recited the list of all of the perfumers that he thought, and he even suggested maybe you should choose this person and that person above me and before me. Like, I shouldn't be the one doing this. He's very authoritative, and he can come off, maybe if you don't know him, as sort of like very well dressed, very polished, very buttoned up. But I actually think he has more humility than I would ever have if I were he. Now, on the other hand, what I will say is Uncle Bernie, as in Bernard Arnault, who runs LVMH, is so powerful in the world that he could humble anyone. So when you work for Guerlain or Dior, or, you know, even Francis Kirkjohn at Dior, like, I'm sorry, but like, there's LVMH above you, and you will always be made to feel like an ant in comparison to great Uncle Bernie. So in that respect, maybe the humility is just a product of that. On the other hand, like, to be going through the list of perfumers that could have been chosen like 20 years ago instead of you, and like the craziness of the offer and all that stuff. It was sort of like he told the story to me like he really truly didn't think at the time he deserved it, and he couldn't believe it was being given to him. And I have a great fondness for the man, a tremendous fondness for him. Now, as for the future of Guerlain, I love the brand, but and then there's no buts. I love the brand. It's just, it's going to be up to Delphine to decide what happens now.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been that way for several years. It's not like that's, you know, some brand new thing. So yeah.
Pat Lester asks, Gabe, I wonder if Bourdon will ever get royalties for his involvement in Creed, especially with conglomerates buying the brand. The story reminds me of Bill Finger, co-creator of Batman, finally.
Yeah, I mean, in a world, in a just world, sure, but in the perfume world, no. I mean, because one of the things that used to happen in the perfume world, even when things were above board, like if you go back to the '80s, there were a lot of weird handshake agreements, or you know, like I don't want to call them dirty agreements, but like the example that I can think of, for instance, is do you remember, JJ, that there was like in CVS and in convenience stores in America, at least, there used to be these fragrances where the packaging said, if you like if you like
If you
X,
like
then
Giorgio, you'll love Primo. Yeah,
yes, yeah,
Parfums de Coeur. Yeah,
yeah, Parfums
Parfums
de
de
Coeur.
Coeur.
They also did Bod, the body spray, but Parfums
Yep.
de Coeur.
Yeah.
So their contract, Parfums de Coeur, was with Firmenich to do these knockoff fragrances. And the bigger players in the industry who were name brands froze out Firmenich from bidding on fragrances for a while because they took that Parfums de Coeur offer, right? So there was a lot of business that was being done in the 80s before, like CK1 and Aqua di Gio exploded in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
sold so much more than any men's fragrance or unisex fragrance. I mean, there were no unisex fragrances.
Not
Um,
really. No, they're
the
very
the
rare.
business really changed. So before the business exploded, there were a lot of agreements where if you tried to collect royalties on them now, forget about it. Even if you're not Pierre Bourdon and Creed, I'm talking about even other agreements. So yeah, no, I don't think that's ever going to come to pass. It would be cool, though. I will say something that would be cool. So Dior did after my book came out, or right when my book came out, or the next summer. I don't remember exactly when, but they did some picnic gathering of all the perfumers alive who had ever done a perfume for Dior.
Oh,
Pretty,
really?
yeah, it was pretty cool. And I
Wow.
saw photos of it. And Pierre, it was in the south of France. Pierre never leaves the north of France, but he went to this. And apparently, maybe he got too buddy with some other older male perfumers, and maybe they were, I don't know, how do I put this, like a little intimidating to some of the younger ones there, which I can sort of see. But
Now, was this at a time when Rudnitska was still around, or was he
no,
still
this is
like?
after my book came out. Renitska's dead for
Oh, okay,
years.
all right. So
Yeah,
much more
yeah. This
recently.
is
Okay, okay,
yeah. But the
okay.
idea was sort of like that's just a cool thing. And
Yeah,
if look, I don't know anything about Kering, the parent of Gucci. I mean, I know a little bit about Kering and a little bit about Gucci, and for that matter, a little bit about the other brands that are under Kering. But it would be cool if one day Creed reconciled with its history. Probably it can't do this because then it would have to actually consider the idea of payment. But like just even a picnic where like, yeah, we'll bring in the dude who did, Bernard Elena, who did, Zest Mandarin Pamplemousse in the 70s. And we'll bring in Pierre and Julian and, Rascanet, who did Aberdeen Lavender, which someone mentioned in the chat before. And
yes.
now that we've got newer fragrances, and we're using Robertet, we'll bring in some of those. It would be cool to do a Creed picnic, and we all have worked on Creed, but I don't see it happening. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know why the hell Fragrantica. I mean, Parfumo has done it. Parfumo's done it. This is the second like video YouTube thing I've done to promote my new book, New York City Love Triangle, 1931. But in the first one, I made it very clear. Please, if you're at Fragrantica or you contribute to that site at all, on the Creed perfume that's called Delphinus or Delphinus, either way, I don't really care. The perfumer is Matthew Nardin, and he works at Mon. Sorry, not Robertet. He works at Mon. Matthew Nardin, he works at Mon. No more anonymity. We're not doing this stupid effing game. Just put it on there. But I don't think there'll be a picnic.
Matthew Nardin.
Yeah, Matthew Nardin did Creed Delphinus or Delphinus.
All right, and this was a release from just last year. It
that's
looks
right.
like a almond, heliotrope, and iris forward fragrance. Wow, that sounds like
a little tunk. I think maybe vanilla, like an incense vanilla, maybe. I think it's supposed to be okay. What I want to make very clear. It doesn't mean anything, but it does mean something. I mean, that doesn't make sense. It means something, right? You go into Creed, you pay $500. I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't, but and then I'm not trying to diss Mon, but we all know that just in terms of like Mon, they can't pay their best perfumers the same salary that like Firmenich can. I mean, there's intense competition. One of the amazing stories of the last 20 years in perfumery is the back, or 15 years, I guess, is the back and forth. If you look at the career of Christophe Reynaud, he did 1 million. And basically he's gone back and forth between Givaudan and Firmenich on these contracts of a certain length, and he'll just go to the higher bidder, right? He'll just go to the higher bidder. That's it, period. So now he's back at Givaudan, which is, because they're willing to pay a lot of money to have Christophe Reynaud back. He was at Firmenich for a while because they were willing to pay to get him away from Givaudan. Hold on, I'll get to you and Justin in a second. But it is worth noting that you can go into a Creed shop and buy a new Creed. It was made by Mon, and you can buy a Lattafa, and it was made by Givaudan. I'm just saying that's an interesting thing. Justin, any good Bourdon stories that you haven't shared before? PRB seems like such a character when he speaks.
Now, Gabe, if you don't mind, I'm going to step away. I'm going to have you take the lead and answer Justin's question, and I will be right back.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. No worries. Oh, God. A story I haven't shared before. Well, I don't know if I haven't shared this before or not, but everyone knows that Givaudan and Firmenich and all of these oil houses have captives, which are ingredients that only they can use for a period of like 15 to 20 years. And then they sell the ingredient to other people, other perfumers at other oil houses. But for a while, it's theirs and theirs alone. And I went to Pierre's house. First, I was in France, and I didn't want to try to drive there. I don't even drive in America, really. So I went with a Givaudan perfumer, a current one, and we went in her Mini Cooper up to Normandy, up to Pierre's, house, which is a little castle with a little moat. And she's a Givaudan perfumer, so she doesn't have access in her day-to-day work to Firmenich captives. Now, all the perfumers are friends. If she wanted to be sneaky, she could probably find her way to smelling Firmenich captives if, she wanted to. But she's super above board and also really artistic. So her mindset is all about creating with the materials that she has. She's not like looking to go smell a raw material that then Givaudan, she wouldn't even be allowed to use in a formula. What would be the point, right? So, I mean, it'd be interesting. So there's some point. But anyway, so we're in Pierre's office, and I am trying to take in everything. So he's got bookshelves filled with history books. He loves Charles de Gaulle. He thinks Charles de Gaulle is one of these amazing historical figures. So there's a million Charles de Gaulle biographies. And he's got a desk overflowing with just letters, including a letter that's from Christian, Dior, Parfums Dior. So it's from Christian Dior recently. And I'm like wondering, is it a little bit creepy or wrong? I mean, I know it's wrong, but like, I'm going to read this letter. Should I read this letter? So I'm kind of trying to maybe read a letter on one of his desks, but he has a separate desk. And he tells the Givaudan perfumer, hey, Givaudan perfumer, that's not her name, but would you like to Would you like
No,
to?
it was number one. It was just number one because of all the Pinot Noir. Carry on, Gabe.
He says to this Givaudan perfumer, and he knows full well what the captive game means. He goes, "So you're a Givaudan, huh?" And he grew up in Rohr. He came up at the Rohr school, and Rohr, became sort of Givaudan. I mean, they were corporate cousins, and then they merged. Eventually, they were called Rohr Givaudan, and then it just Givaudan. That is a crazy takeover because Rohr was a perfume powerhouse and Givaudan was nothing. And the people at Rohr convinced their bosses at Hoffman LaRoche that they should oversee Givaudan, which is kind of genius, but they took the name Givaudan. Anyway, Pierre goes to this perfumer and he goes, "So you're a Givaudan. I bet you haven't smelt the following Firmenich captives." And he pulls out a drawer in not the desk that I was looking at, because I was trying to read a letter on the other desk. He pulls out a drawer and it's got like all these Firmenich captives. And so now he's just like doing a smell session of Firmenich captives for this Givaudan perfumer, and she's like getting super excited because she's actually like, "Oh shit, I've actually really always wanted to smell that raw material, and like I haven't had a chance." And they're like pretty new. So to me, I don't know if I've never told that story before. That could be in my book, but there's something about the fact that like he sort of said it in a taunting way, but in this taunting, playful way, and he had access to like all these Firmenich captives, that like Pierre is so weirdly playful. Like, how could you be so against making current perfumes in France for like a French company and like still sort of being out there? But like, you're so excited to pull out a drawer of Firmenich captives and like have the Givaudan perfumer who's never gotten to smell them have a sniff only because you're willing to show her. It like shows this kind of mentality where he's out of the game, but mentally he's still sort of in it. And in a way, I kind of relate to that more now than I ever did before. Because like I wrote the Ghost Perfumer, and someone at one of the companies that I consulted for when I was doing perfume consulting work after the book came out, said to me, I said to him, "Do you think I should write another perfume book or I should just move on to a different topic?" And this guy said, "I think you just do the best job with one topic that you can do, and then you just go on to another topic." That's me. That's my thought. And I sort of, and I'm like of two minds, right? I'm like, so now I feel like I'm caught in the way that Pierre is. Like, he doesn't really want to still be in that grind, but he's also like playfully sniffing brand new Firmenich captives and showing them off for the Givaudan perfumer. So he's not like letting go either. And that's sort of where I'm at. I mean, I almost do the same thing. Like, I recently moved them into a separate spot because I was trying to maybe cure myself of the habit. But for whatever reason, I had like habanolide, romandolide, helvetolide.
Those are the fruity ones.
I had all of these. I had all the
Fruity
fruity
musks.
musks on my desk, and I'd be sniffing them all the time. Just, I don't know why. I truly don't know why. I mean, I know why. It gave me pleasure, but like I also don't really know why. Meaning I'm broken. I will write about something else. I'll write a true crime. I want you all to read it, but like that part of me that is in perfume is still going to be there. So I'll stretch like Stretch Armstrong, but like I'm going to be kind of pulled.
Here you go, folks. Here's the link to purchase New York City Love Triangle 1931. I wanted to go back to, wait, hold a second. Nick S. Does anyone know if the classic creeds in the new bottles are reformulations?
I mean, I don't know any of that for sure at all. I know that Royal Mayfair 2024 probably is because they put a year on it. And it hasn't been out for a while. Royal Mayfair is hilarious. Nick. I don't know, Nick, if you've ever seen when Royal Mayfair came out in 2009, it came out under the name of Windsor, which is not
Windsor, that's right. Yeah.
It's not a bad name to use, except that the body copy that came with it, it didn't praise the current Windsors. It praised the very specific Windsor who left the throne, who abdicated to marry Wallace Simpson, and is basically considered like the worst recent king. And this goes to show like how fucked up the Creed mindset was. That like I know what we'll do. And the ad copy said, like, why don't we celebrate a love that like is so strong it causes someone to even abdicate, and it kind of like talks up this unbelievable romance between the king and Wallace Simpson. And Wallace Simpson was notoriously anti-Semitic and on the side of the Axis in World War II.
Yes.
It's one of the reasons why the deposed, the abdicated king was kept far away from the other Windsors. It's like, you were on the wrong side of World War II. But Creed marketing was fucking off the wall. It was one of the reasons why this book was so fun, and also like I had a lawyer look over every word to make sure that like everything I said was true and backed up with research, because it's almost like too crazy. Like, is that the best romance you could come up with? Like, it was so weird. It was like, let's celebrate like the romance that caused abdication, Windsor. And I'm just like, and then like it goes on, and it's like Wallace Simpson, a figure of mystery and beauty that she so enraptured the throne. And it's just like, there's some historical context you may not have read before you wrote this. Who wrote this?
Was this for us? Catch my whiff. What is your opinion of Ifra? Ifra only has one A.
Yeah, so my opinion of Ifra basically hinges on, I haven't been following it. So I used to read Perfumer and Flavorist every day, very religiously, and also a lot of other industry stuff. Ifra got rated, right? So it's like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I don't know. Time flies. But one morning, very early, without anyone getting any advance notice, the EU and America's law enforcement, they all busted in at once to IFF, Firmenich, Givaudan, Simrise, and Ifra to investigate whether they were colluding on the pricing of raw materials and maybe other things also, like divvying up the market. And what I would say is, my opinion of Ifra, there's a couple things, right? We all love to say, why are they banning materials, or why are they saying take out the atronol from the oak moss? And yeah, I have a lot of I don't have JJ's collection, but I love old perfumes. So I'm all for keeping the irritants and the allergens in. So that there's that opinion. But my large opinion is the Fragrance Foundation is really ignoble in a lot of ways. But Ifra really, I think, in a way that people don't talk about, facilitates a discourse between these companies that can verge on antitrust stuff. And, it's sort of like, what's my opinion of Manchester City in the Premier League in England? They've been accused of literally more than 100 breaches of financial fair play because, of course, they're owned by Abu Dhabi, and you can't just pump unlimited money from Abu Dhabi into the club. It has to be a self-sustaining enterprise, and they've probably violated the law. So we'll see what the actual ruling is. In the same way, we'll see what the actual ruling is on Ifra. But in the end, I'm probably going to suspect that Man City was involved in taking monies from Abu Dhabi that they shouldn't. And I'm probably going to suspect that Ifra has facilitated a degree of monopoly and collusion that they shouldn't have. That doesn't mean I have the evidence for it. It's just that they were busted in early morning raids. And if you look at Ifra and look at what they do, these companies should not be sharing information to a large extent.
Well, I do know that there are perfumers who will defend Ifra as being more of a go-between from the technocrats of the EU to the consumer.
Can I just put a time out though?
Yeah, please do.
There are some great perfumers out there who know a ton about the industry and also, of course, about perfume. And I know nothing about raw materials like the way they do at all. However, some of them are not willfully blind, but very naive about the collusion. And the greatest example of this is, if you go back 25 years ago, the CEO of Givaudan went to prison in America for collusion. Now, in this particular case, it had to do with colluding on the price of vitamin B. At the time, Givaudan was part of Hoffman La Roche, and they were artificially making sure that no one was selling B vitamins beyond a certain price. But the bottom line is that when you talk to perfumers today, 99% of them, the very best of them, don't even remember or know. And I think the prison was like in West Virginia, I want to say, that like this has happened already before. It's already happened. It already happened 25 years ago. Now, we all have very short memories, and I'm not saying anyone's wrong. And by the way, it is useful sometimes to have a go-between. However, I will also just say, like, I don't remember who it was, but there was a perfumer who was just like, well, I don't know. I don't know that there's ever been collusion in this industry. And I sent the person an article, and I'm like, do you see how this Givaudan CEO is in American prison? By the way, I interviewed that ex-Givaudan CEO. He had nothing but flattering things to say. He was in a minimum security prison. But the well, he should have had very terrible things to say, but I think they paid him off to be quiet because he essentially took the fall. He had been named CEO for like a month when he was sent to prison. He wasn't actually responsible for the collusion. So, yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't have inside info here. I shouldn't be saying anything except that look up the raid, look up the pre-dawn raid, the EU raid, and the US raids on the four institutions, the four companies and IFRA, and look up the Givaudan CEO who went to prison because of B vitamin stuff. And then let's just see what the results are if they ever actually come out with anything. I think the bottom line is cosmetics are a real problem. They pose health hazards. They pose microplastic hazards.
That's what I think that they're much more of a threat than any kind of perfumes because of
well, no, but the thing is, okay, so but it's all connected. I mean, the glass of a perfume bottle isn't just glass, it's lined. It's lined with a very thin coating of essentially like a polyethylene type thing. Or not the glass. I shouldn't say the glass, but the before it's put in your individual glass, when they have like the giant canisters from which your glasses, your individual bottles are filled.
Yeah.
Those are
so
lined.
Not the final product. The bottle.
It's not the final product, but those are lined with a polyethylene that dissolves, essentially with like a forever plastic, right? A forever.
Oh, like those like PFAS.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So here's the real deal. The real deal is it is 100% necessary for anyone who's making perfume to make sure. And by the way, let's just be really clear. You can find all sorts of stuff like that in like the breast milk of women. Like we're not that far away from like making direct connections between stuff. So the cosmetics industry, the beauty industry writ large needs as much interference as possible in the EU, especially because in America, who the fuck knows what our regulations are? They change every 4 years. But they need as much interference as possible so that the beauty industry doesn't get really onerous stuff. So they voluntarily do bullshit, right? So they don't get real onerous governmental oversight. And in that way, IFRA serves its purpose because they push off real government oversight so that the industry can live on. Because real government oversight would be so restrictive. It wouldn't have anything to do with oak moss. It would have to do with forever chemicals. It would have to do with like long-term studies about stuff staying in tissue and human tissue. And yes, you spraying yourself with perfume isn't like the killer. It's much more about all these ancillary things, containers and other stuff. Long story short, IFRA runs interference, and that's valuable. I also think that there might be a collusive aspect, and so does the EU, and that's why it was raided, or at the very least, that's why reports say it was raided. Please don't sue me.
Yeah, there's a lot of concerns about these consumer products containing things that may not be best for exposure. And Yeah, I wasn't even aware of PFAS being used in that respect. Um, I'm gonna go to my.
Well, actually, it's a funny. Okay, by Killian's angel share, it's exactly the whole idea of the thing, right? Is to prevent angel share. That's the whole idea.
Really?
Angel share, evaporation, right? These plastic linings keep shit in. You would think that like things aren't porous, but like you can make things really not porous.
It's crazy. That's just crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy. Anybody else have any other comments, questions before we round things off? Gabe, I want to have you go backstage for just a little bit. I'm really glad that you were able to reach beyond 2 hours for this live stream, given that you were a little under the weather. And
Thank
so am
you.
I, frankly. That's why I drank a whole bottle of Pinot Noir during this live stream. So if anybody else has any comments or questions, we have 30 people who are still tuned in after 2 hours and 20 minutes, which is really impressive. We have right now, we have 49 likes. Let's try to get at least 50 likes before we sign off this evening. Come on, folks. Come on, I know that there are more people who can share some likes. We have Donnie here. This was awesome, guys. Gabe, you're a gentleman and a scholar.
Thank you very, very much.
Ambient mode is enabled. Yes. You know, this is how I do it, right? It's time for us to take a dip into the healing pool, get some birch leaves, some
I
healing
think it's
herbs.
time for us to take a lighter and some Lubon, right?
Yeah.
And
For sure, for sure. This is the theme music that I use now because I don't have to worry about copyright. I don't have to worry about my monetization being affected. So, does anybody else have anything else to contribute or share or comment on or any other questions? Nick S says, "Excellent stream, gentlemen."
thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much. Okay. Well, I think what we're going to do is we're going to round things off this evening. Just a reminder for those of you who aren't aware, next week I am going to have another quarterly live with Rachel. Rachel K. Ing is going to be joining me again next Thursday. We're going to be having a live stream at the same time next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then if I look at my schedule here quickly, we're going to have another effluvium in 2 weeks. And the effluvium that we will have in 2 weeks, I believe, is going to be from a certain gentleman from Australia named Rafi. And that's going to be a Saturday live stream. And I'll give you more details on that soon. But in the meantime, we're going to sign off for now. Gabe, stick around for a little bit for the backstage. And I wish all of you a great morning, afternoon, or evening, depending upon where you are in the globe. So take care and be well.